BrianTerrell, international peace activist for decades, and had a lot of work in Afghanistan. Thanks for chatting with me, Brian.
It's a pleasure, Roger.
Help us understand a little bit about what you know.
I think one of the things that bothers me, even frightens me most right now, is this idea that what we're seeing in Afghanistan are good intentions gone bad. And I'm not talking about individual soldiers. Families have made sacrifices. And I'm not talking about individuals in Afghanistan who cooperated with the US occupation because they really needed to. They had very little choice. But the idea that the people who planned this, that there were good intentions about going in, good intentions about getting out, that all along this has been a bad deal, and it had to end badly. There was no alternative, and it's manipulating, and even before the occupation. Back when 20 years ago, I was using this quote very often, but it's from and I think it's very, very, very telling today, very appropriate for today. George Kennan wrote a policy planning study for foreign relations to the United States in 1948. He was a big man in the State Department, and he's really well thought of in history, partly for what his reputed realism. But he said this back in 1948, and it was only in the 70s this was really made public. Talking to the US State Department, he said, "We have 50% of the world's wealth, but only 6.3% of its population. In this situation, we cannot fail to be the object of envy and resentment. Our real task in the coming period is to divide a pattern of relationships that will permit us to maintain this position of disparity without positive detriment to our national security. To do so, we will have to dispense with all sentimentality and daydreaming. Our attention will have to be concentrated everywhere on our immediate national executives. We need not deceive ourselves that we can afford today the luxury of altruism and self-benefaction. We should dismiss the aspiration to be liked, to be regarded as a repository of high-minded international altruism. We should stop putting ourselves in the position of being our brother's keeper. We should cease to talk about vague and unreal objectives like human rights, the raising of living standards, and democratization. The day is not far off when we are going to have to deal in straight power concepts. The less than we are hampered by idealistic slogans, the better." Now, the idealistic slogans are still there, and the appeals to altruism and human rights and benefiting the people, the rhetoric of being our brother's keeper is still there, but if it ever had any meaning at all, and looking at the broad view of US history, it's questionable. It does not anymore. These are political postures being made. And why that's necessary to remember that is because we're going to be repeating this over and over again. And I think what the realism of George Kennan in 1948 is no longer realism. He was saying we can't afford altruism. Well, really today we can't afford not to be altruistic. We can't afford that it's, as Dr. King put it, the choice will be no longer nonviolence or violence. It's nonviolence or non-existence. The whole idea of organized human life, and even the life of other species on this planet, is in the balance, and things aren't looking very good today. I can't speak to 1948, the decade before I was born, but I think today it's really we who are talking about peace, we are talking about getting off of fossil fuel, we who are talking about sharing the resources, we who are talking about a world without borders. We are the ones today who are the hard-headed realists, the ones who are really looking at the world situation and what do we have to do. And it's those who believe they can see the idea that that we can go on like this. That's unrealistic. I take Greta Thunberg a year or so ago. She very much objected when she was called an idealist, and she says, "No, I'm not. I am a realist." Realizing that the kind of changes that humanity, and I think especially our country, need to make right now.
Are you hearing from people that you know?
Yes, in all different situations. Yeah, people who are trying to get out at the airport. I've heard from some people who have crossed on foot the border into Pakistan, and it's very unclear whether that's going to be a safe haven for them or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all this talk about getting people out and the refugees, and of course they should be given every welcome and be cared for. I've also heard about the conditions that the people in the U.S. base in Qatar are facing, just barbaric situation. Those people who escaped from the airport in Kabul are in very bad conditions, and it's not very unclear what's going to happen with them. But there are 38 million people in Afghanistan, and I think we were talking about the people who worked with the United States getting first priority. I can't think of prioritizing the needs of the people of Afghanistan. The median age is just a few months over 18 years old. The vast majority are children, and what they need is justice. And one thing that Voices for Creative Nonviolence had talked about for its whole history is a need for reparations. And reparations is not foreign aid, and it is not Matthew Ho, who used to be with the he worked for the various departments, but he was a Marine officer in Afghanistan and with the reconstruction projects. And he says that the only measure was how much money they were spending, and he would have sometimes millions of dollars in cash that he would just be handing out, to people. And often a lot of that money actually went to the Taliban. Billions spent. They spent more money, supposedly was spent on the rebuilding of Afghanistan by the United States than the entire Marshall Plan that rebuilt the cities of Europe after World War II. But my last visit was in 2018, and you'd hardly saw a pot filled with that money. And there is corruption in Afghanistan, but most of the corruption is with contractors and politicians here in the United States. Some people, that money did not disappear. It wasn't exactly wasted. It was stolen. And we don't need any more of that. We need the United Nations or some other third party. The United States needs to pay up and pay up big. We should be paying more money, put more money in the next few years in the rebuilding of Afghanistan than we've spent in destroying it. And I don't see that happening, and it's heartbreaking. Today, the fear is that Afghanistan, a peaceful Afghanistan, will have peaceful and fair relations economically, socially, with Iran, with whom they share a border, with China, with whom they share a border. These are decisions of who they're going to trade with, who they're going to allow, if they're going to allow pipelines, the vast mineral wealth that Afghanistan has. should be decided by the Afghan people, and that has just not been allowed, and I don't think it will be. I'm just really afraid in the most immediate sense. There's so little that can be done. Ann Wright Colonel Ann Wright, former diplomat with the U.S. State Department, is trying to keep the U.S. consulate and embassy open. And of course, we're talking about tens of thousands more Afghans who the United States has a specific obligation to, but to give sanctuary to, but we can't if there's no embassy. But I think we really have to make a tremendous change. We have to oppose war. We can't be satisfied with what Biden deserves no congratulations for ending this, as he also talks about continuing the war from beyond the horizon. Drones and bombing will continue this war, and we have to demand no, and we have to take these resources going to this war to make reparations and to make the kind of changes that we need to have an environment that human beings will be able to live in 10, 20 years.
Well, thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Roger.